Welcome, one and all. We are getting things kicked off here. If you're joining us on the replay, welcome to the replay. If you're joining us here live, thanks for being here today. We're excited to dive into our topic today. We're just kind of getting everything set up, getting all the live on Facebook and all the recordings and all those different things ready to roll here. So and just letting people join in as they come along here in the next probably minute or so, and then we will be kicking off. So I hope all is well with everybody, and that we're ready to dive into a bit of a conversation here about how to finish the year off strong. This is always an interesting conversation, always an interesting point as we kind of dive into this. We've had some of these conversations in the past, and they've always been very productive and interesting, if nothing else, right? But so yeah, we'll jump in here. So thank you so much for joining us. Today's conversation here around the community table is about the final 40, how to finish your year off stronger than you could have imagined, right? And so my name is Ian Campbell. I'm the CEO of Mission Suite. Joining me as always today is Dean Isaacs, founder and CEO of Vantage Group, a serial entrepreneur with over 20 years of hands-on business growth, sales, and marketing experience. He works with B2B companies across the US that range from startups to the Fortune 500, including Mission Suite, actually. And his passion is helping small and mid-sized businesses achieve their growth goals by developing and implementing high-impact sales, marketing, and growth strategies. Also with us today is Stephanie Hogan, founder of Gallantry Coaching and Consulting. She is a full-service executive coaching firm. She focuses on personal and professional scalability to help sales professionals, executives, and business owners reduce stress and get more done by focusing on what is important and necessary to be successful. So, Stephanie and Dean, thanks for being here. I'm excited to dive in today.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, to hang out with the two of you, it feels like a real treat.
I know, right? Seriously. I mean, who wouldn't want to hang out with the two of us anyway, right?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, looking at the attendees, I see my mom, my sister, so before we jump in today, I just want to make sure to address a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to be taking questions throughout the session today. And so if you have questions, don't worry about waiting to the end. You can ask them as we go. We always keep an eye on these things. If you're on Facebook and you're watching live on Facebook, definitely just shoot some questions in the comments. I'll be paying attention to that. And then also, if you are watching the replay, again, make sure to add questions in the comments below the video, because we'll make sure to get them answered for you as best we can on text, even if we can't be here live with us. So just if you are here on Zoom with us, do me a favor and just use the Q&A, the little Q&A chat thing on the Zoom screen, and not the chat. That's going to be a better way for us to manage this. So with that, Dean, people know you and I, right? I mean, that we've been doing, I think we've been doing this for almost a year and a half now.
Yeah,
believe it or not. Yeah, seriously. But this is the first time we've had Stephanie join us. So Stephanie, if you can kind of take 30 seconds or so and do an introduction. And well, when I tell you 30 seconds, you actually mean 30 seconds. You actually take me as 30 seconds. So take 30 to 60 seconds or so.
Okay, good.
Take some time.
I won't set the timer.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And let us know who you are. Let our attendees know who you are.
Sure. Well, Ian kind of alluded to the fact that my day job, I am a certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, specifically focusing with executives, sales professionals. Most of my clients are generally business owners, scaling anywhere from $500,000 to multiple hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We work with a lot of sales professionals, but I think one of the things that Ian and Dean and I have talked about before is my affiliation with the 12-week year. So I'm a certified 12-week year trainer, which I think really will resonate with our conversation today in, running to the tape or to the finish line. And so I look forward to sharing a little bit more about that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oftentimes when we have guests on like this, we end up with a much longer conversation. So, it's a much longer introduction. So, I love the concision. It's a concision. It's
30 seconds,
30
baby.
seconds. I know, right? She had her watch going. I know that she did. Oh, beautiful. Well, let's dive in and let's start talking a little bit about this. So for everybody who is joining us here today, the three of us actually got together yesterday, had to have a conversation around kind of some of the things that we want to make sure that we address and we talked about. And Dean, something that you and I have talked about any number of times is that January 1st is this kind of like, this thing that we have in our mind, right? And it's always kind of this like, oh, I just got to get it to the end of the year, right? Where, whether or not things actually change at the end of the year, or more importantly, at the beginning of the new year, there's, may or may not be true, right? So I'm curious, like, when we're thinking about year end and thinking about all this stuff, why should we be focusing on, and Stephanie, I'm sure you've got a particular perspective on this given your 12-week cycles, but why should we be focusing on January 1 as kind of the key our kind of key end date for well, not just for the calendar year, but just for what we're trying to get done here?
Yeah, it's funny. There's this mystical thing that happens when the clock ticks from one year to the next, right?
It's the golden ring, right?
There's something about it that I do think that there's this psychological thing that happens. So December can feel like, or even the fourth quarter could feel heavy and it's a drudge, and maybe you're in a bit of burnout and you're trying to just get through. And for some reason you hit January and it can feel like refreshed, and there's optimism and there's energy in the air and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of psychology that goes with that. I think that the purpose of today, I think, is thinking about what can we do with what we've got left, and how can we set ourselves up for success in 2022. I know the topic of today's session is the final 40, right? Final 40 days. And I was looking at my calendar before we hopped on this morning, and I'm like, how many days do I actually have? Because 40 is like, that's the number of business days. But when I looked, I'm going to be out of town a little bit next week. And of course, you've got the holidays and all this other stuff. I've got 32 business days left in the year. Not 40, I've got 32, which is a significant, that's 20%, 25% less than I thought I had. So out of those 32 days, how many of those days, Stephanie, you mentioned this also, how many of those days are already booked out, right? They're already spoken for, you can't move them. Probably 5 or 6, maybe more. Before you know it, you've really got a couple of business working weeks left. So all of a sudden that puts everything into clear focus. Like, all right, it's not a case of getting through the rest of the year. It's a case of getting the most out of it, which doesn't mean you have to work yourself to death either, right? I think mental health and mental well-being is such an important thing that sometimes as business owners, we put our mental health and our physical health second to the business. And I think hopefully in the last couple of years, we've been able to refocus on where we should be spending our time and energy. But nonetheless, the story here is there's a finite amount of time left before this mystical thing happens and we go into 2022. So hopefully today we'll be able to give our attendees 2 or 3 really actionable takeaways that they can go do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, I'm curious from your perspective too, right? Because I mean, I know you've like one of the big focus of the 12-week year is breaking the year up into basically 4 big chunks, right? And so with that, from that perspective, why is year end such an important thing?
Well, I mean, artificially, we've created, I mean, obviously the world and society supports that we've put this line in the sand, so to speak. But back to Dean's point, it doesn't have to be December 31st. For some of us who've made the decision that we're going to take some time off at the end of the year, or have a 12-week cycle, if you will, that's not necessarily coinciding with a quarter per se. It's really about what's the activity that is going to occur between now and when we hit that finish line, artificial or not. Dean made a comment. I know when my line in the sand is. I happen to have 2 more business days than Dean, but like he alluded to, there's some things that are already booked on the calendar. So I think knowing when that timeline is and being able to create a plan that you can execute towards it. It's really interesting. Michael Lennington and I have had a lot of conversations. He's the co-author of the 12-week year about the concept. And when we were in the midst of COVID, 12 weeks was like 100 years, right? I mean, think about last summer, if you were talking about 12 weeks, that was like a whole lifetime away. And so the concepts and the philosophies around the 12-week, it doesn't have to be 12 weeks. It's really about how are you going to execute the period of time that you have. If that's 3 weeks, if it's 6 weeks, if it's 90 days, or in our case, in our conversation today, 40 days, what is the activity that's going to take place and how are you going to schedule that in your calendar to make sure it gets executed on? You've heard me say this before, what gets scheduled gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I happen to be the exception that proves that rule myself. But for most people, absolutely, absolutely. But so I'm curious. Is there a benefit to creating these constructs and creating these kind of time constraints around us?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, think about it. If you were to look at the 12 months of the year, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and we were to analyze, in fact, Dean, and I'm sure Ian, based on your business as well, we've all seen companies that kind of go through seasonality, but we very rarely see that they have even numbers throughout the 12 months of the year. Now, sure, if you are a landscaping company or if you're selling something that's hot around Christmas time, those may be times that we're going to see peaks. But to be perfectly honest, in most organizations, we're going to see big peaks in the last 3 months. And the reason why we're going to see those peaks is because we've created this sense of urgency for ourselves around that period of time. And so that's why we do see success. I mean, you guys both know, I have 4 children and I run a company. So for me, I got a lot going on in the next, 40, 60 days, right? And it's not just at work. We've got plays and Christmas programs and holiday exchanges, and magically we're able to get all these things done. Now, might be a little bit of burnout when I'm up wrapping presents on Christmas Eve, but for the most part, we figure out how to fit it all in. And it's because we've created that sense of urgency in that period of time. So whatever the magic is associated with that, which is really creating the sense of urgency, how do we reproduce that for other times of the year? So I would encourage you to, as you're thinking about 2022 planning, how can you use the magic of this period of time between now and the end of the year and sprinkle it, if you will, on the first 40 days in January so you can see the same activity level. Our goal for this conversation is not to help you to survive. We want you to thrive in that period of time between now and when we hit the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you both kind of alluded to the holiday burnout, right? And I mean, that tends to be pretty significant in business owners, right? I mean, I know a number of people who basically kind of shut down their business because nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing anything, right? At the end of the year, right? So, I mean, and if we're going to maximize this time in some way, shape, or form, and I think this will set up the rest of the rest of our conversation pretty well. If we're going to maximize this time in whatever that means to us, what should we be doing? What should we be focusing on to make sure to avoid that holiday burnout of, well, nothing's getting done anyway, so I'm just going to check out for the next 40 days. And then, or maybe, I'll spend the next 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. And then after that, I'm pretty much done. Right. So how do, what should we be doing? What should we be focusing on? How should we be addressing that?
Yeah, I think I would start by suggesting don't try and do too much. Right. We always have a to-do list that never seems to go all the way down to zero, right? We're always adding and there's always stuff to do. And then we've already, we've talked about the finite amount of time that's left in the year. Be really conscious of working on those things that are going to have an impact on your life, on your health, on your business, on your clients, and on next year as well. Right. So I think that's, if you're going to make a list of 2 or 3 things that you've got to focus on in the remaining days of the year, planning for 2022, while it sounds like a no-brainer, you should be doing it. If you wait till 2022, the next year, and you kind of get to going on it middle of January, the plan's sort of done by the end of the month, you get started on execution by mid-February, that's 10 or 12% of 2022 gone. So now you're immediately in catch-up mode and you feel that pressure for the rest of the year. So prioritizing what activities you do the balance of the year is really important. And I would say one of them is maximize your income, right? So we talked about this calendar year thing. So many companies have this annual budget, right? This mystical thing that we do to manage the cash in our business is called a budget. And so if you really understand your clients and your customers and your market, you should understand what their budget cycle is. And if they're on a kind of a use it or lose it budget cycle, this could be a big revenue opportunity for you to be able to reach out to them and see how you can help them spend their money with you, because they know if they don't spend it and they've got surplus cash at the end of the year, there's a good chance that won't be included in next year's budget. Somehow the boss will say, you got away with 10% less this year. Guess what you're going to get next year? You're going to get 90% of that budget. So they want to spend the money. So if you're going to start to prioritize activities, figure out how to capture that. And if they're on an annual cycle budget and they've already spent all their money, be in position to be budgeted for next year. Have the conversations about their 22 budget. You may already be behind the curve on that, quite honestly, depending on the way they budget and how far ahead they are. But I think maximizing your revenue is got to be a key for the rest of the year, and it doesn't have to be difficult. A lot of clients just they need to spend the money, so make it easy for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, you during our conversation yesterday, you brought up the idea of the focus compass, and as kind of a methodology to use to kind of make those to define those priorities, right? That Dean was just talking about, right? And so I'm curious if you could kind of dive into that a little bit and kind of discuss that.
Yeah, I think so. Going back to the 12-week year, this is not necessarily the time that you're going to like read the book and implement it between now and the end of the year. So we talked.
I've got 3 days to read and then another 37 to implement. What are you talking about?
There you go. I mean, it'll be fine. Just read it this weekend. You'll be fine.
Exactly.
But
right.
I think it's if you're trying to find something that's very simple to execute on whatever it is that you need to be working on. We use the focus compass, and it's really just, if you can imagine a piece of paper, 4 quadrants. Each quadrant has a different label in it. The first quadrant is me. What are the things that I'm going to focus on with regard to me? And Dean started to allude to this, but I think it's really important that I'm seeing now, especially, COVID and the COVID-19, 19 pounds, like the freshman 15, right? All of those types of things are coming to play, that people are starting to realize how vital and how important their health is. Maybe they got COVID or had a family member or haven't been focusing on themselves. What are the things that you need to focus on for yourself between now and the end of the year? And in a lot of cases, those end up being health related, right? I'm going to make sure I'm working out. I'm going to make sure I'm taking downtime, meditating, whatever that looks like. The second quadrant is for those people around you. So, your 1 degree of separation, the people in your household. How are you going to manage your relationship with your significant other, or, making sure that your kids, that they're okay. I have to tell you, obviously Children's Hospital announced that we had a statewide state of emergency as a result of mental health for kids. I was on a meeting last night, and I can tell you every single person that was on there was a parent, and every one of them talked about the mental health of their children and what a challenge that has been. And so what are we going to do as far as our focus between now and the end of the year to help to make sure that our family members are okay too? Because I think we've seen a lot of this. It doesn't matter what you focus on in your business. If things aren't right with your health, or things aren't right with the people around you, if the wheels come off the bus, the business has to go by the wayside and you have to focus on other things. So if we're maintaining those things, then we can actually really dedicate the time to the third quadrant, which is our business, right? What is it that we need to be talking about or working on? Dean alluded to one example, which is if you're going to be going after some of your clients to identify either do they have any budget left, or how do you become number 1 next year? Maybe that is a tactic that you're going to take as far as connecting with growing your business or taking advantage of that last few months of the year. And the last quadrant is kind of loose. It depends on if you have something personally or professionally that you're working on. I have a lot of clients who are working on continuing education right now. So that's an area that they focus on. Or some individuals are on a board for a nonprofit organization. So using that as a quadrant that is flexible based on the things that are most interesting to you. But of those 4 quadrants, we really only want to focus on 1 or maybe 2, better 1 than 2. But we only want to focus on a couple of things, because you can't do everything. If you are focused on everything, that defeats the purpose of the definition of focus, right? We're looking at everything, we're not focused on anything. So instead of taking that shotgun approach, how are we taking that, rifle laser focus between now and the end of the year? Because if you're focused on everything, you're not going to move the needle like you want to. So focus on those few things that will make an impact. And in some cases, even like your health, you'll see residual or a ripple effect in other parts of your world. Because if your health is good, then you're able to come to the office and be yourself. If you're focusing on revenue and you're getting some big wins, that's going to give you energy and be positive in other parts of your business. That's not to say that's all you're doing. Let's be clear. That's the thing you're most focused on.
Mm-hmm. I think I want to say it was Alexander the Great that said to defend everything is to defend nothing. Right. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're alluding to here.
Exactly.
So, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious I want to kind of open this up a little bit more and expand on this, and I'm interested to hear from the both of you. How should we decide what that one or maybe two things, like I've got a wife and a child, right? So my, upper left quadrant is forced into two things, right? I mean, but that's an easy one, right? For personally speaking, I know that I have to work out more, right? That's an easy one. But for the business itself, how do we decide what that one or maybe two things is actually going to be?
Dean, I'll let you go first. You're welcome.
Yeah. I think that's like the $40,000 question in business in general, right? Whether it's the last section of the year or any given time, I think you have to stop before you go, right? We tend to just keep going and pushing and ideas and all this crazy stuff. So while we've just said you've got a finite amount of time for the rest of the year, I think you take a small piece of that and stop intentionally and just think. And just focus and get away from the day-to-day grind of the business. Get away from family and friends and just find the happy place, wherever that is for you. And just ponder the business. Just think about the business. Take off all of the typical restraints or constraints we put on ourselves when we think about our business. And just see what bubbles up, because that often is kind of your future vision. And that will allow you to come back to what you need to do today to achieve or move towards that future vision. So I think we have to stop before we go. And I think having planning for uninterrupted work time, right? So you've got think time and you've got work time as well. Not trying to get those priorities done while everything else is going on around you. So being really prioritizing your time, I think, is a big piece of it. And ultimately, there's a gut level. I think we often ignore our intuition, right? We let our brain take over, and that sounds maybe a little woo for some, but it's so powerful. If you allow yourself to focus on that and allow that to sort of come through, you'll know where to spend your time. You'll know that thing on your to-do list that's always been there. You never quite get to it. You realize, you know what? It's time. I'm just going to boot that thing off and just let it go. No, without any guilt or anything else. So that's sort of like how I think about how you prioritize when you've got a lot on the line, which in this case is time and energy.
It's funny that you say that, Dean. And one of the things I was reflecting on is a conversation I had with one of my mentors back from my corporate days, is that there's a difference between working in the business and working on the business. And too often, in fact, one of my coaching clients today, we had this conversation. It is work on the business, or in the business. And we're not taking enough time to stop the crazy train, stop the merry-go-round long enough to try and figure out what's going on. What is it that we need to be focusing on? So, Ian, the answer to the $1 million question is, you have to, in order to figure out what you need to do between now and the end of the year, you have to stop and figure out what you need to do, because there is no simple answer. The answer for my business, the answer for your business, the answer for Deed's, all very different. Yeah. But we intuitively, quite frankly, we know the answer. We just need to stop and be honest with ourselves about what activity really does need to take place. And it may be something that you really don't love to do. Let's be honest. Something that you probably, in some cases, it may be something that you don't like. business owners, like, you're really good at making something, but business development maybe isn't that thing that you love to do, or you've got to make some hard phone calls to some folks to talk to them about price changes or whatever the case is. It may be something that's difficult, but you need to be real honest with yourself. And Dean's right. You need to, my professional opinion, you need to physically remove yourself from your environment, go someplace completely different. Dean says your happy place. I don't care if it's a hike. I don't care if it's the Starbucks down the street. I don't care if it's the library or the Barnes and Noble or wherever it is that you hide so that you can have your think time, but turn off the electronic devices and spend that time really analyzing what needs to take place. Yeah. Which also speaks to another 12-week year concept is, what gets measured gets done. That whole concept of scorekeeping, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but really making sure that you know what the numbers look like and going back and reviewing the tapes. We talked about, I found my article. We were talking about, my dad is a huge New York Times guy. In fact, every week I get like a little stack with a bunch of stickies on it. And he's like, you need to read all these articles. And so this one he sent me the other day, how does a star hurdler analyze a quarter-mile battle inch by inch? And so seeing this really made me think about this conversation today, that the way that you're going to get really good or execute this year and next year is really breaking down your business and spending the time working on your business, analyzing those numbers, studying the tapes. David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, I just finished that one, and they talk about in the military world, after action reports. Right? As soon as they do some type of drill or they're going in combat, there's a whole report that takes place and they're really analyzing what happened. If the military does it, they don't do it for naught. There's a reason. That's not a waste of time. But as business owners, so frequently we're just run. We need to stop and really create time for ourselves to be able to analyze and figure out what it is that we need to do and be honest with ourselves and just go do it.
Yeah. I'd love to add a little bit to that because you got me thinking. I think what we do is only as important as it relates to what we want. So I think we have to start with, what do we want to get? What do we want to achieve? What is the outcome we're trying to achieve in this finite amount of time? And that will also help inform us on what we want to do. So the hurdler example in that news article, right? They want to increase their speed, right, across that 110 meters. That's not the goal. That what they want to achieve maybe is more efficiency over the hurdle. So that informs what they need to work on. Ultimately impacts their speed. So I would say that's part of that reflection for the rest of the year is, what do you want? If you have a revenue goal, and if that's still important for you to hit, that's going to inform the activities. If you're happy with where you're at, revenue-wise, profitability-wise, what are the other outcomes that you want to achieve? And that's going to affect where you spend your effort.
Mm-hmm. And Dean, too, if you've already hit those numbers, what are you doing to lay the groundwork for next year? You alluded to that earlier. I think, even thinking about going into next year, I work with a lot of financial advisors, 30 to 60 day cycle. I'm sorry, 60 to 90 day cycle of what it is that we're seeing between the time that we meet with clients to time when the actual business is occurring. The work that you're doing today, that's what's going to really start to create your year for next year. So it may be, depending on your sales cycle, that it may not be necessarily running to the tape. It may be laying the pavers going into January 2022.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, you kind of brought up the idea of just reviewing things, right? And kind of the after action reports and kind of reflecting and kind of studying the tapes as you were kind of putting it yesterday. So I wonder if you guys can kind of dive into that a little bit, like, realistically, first of all, how much time, like how often, how frequently should we be doing something like this? Because I mean, obviously to what we're saying is that this is not the end, right? I mean, this is just the next milestone. And we really have to be thinking more about, that we all talk about, we got to finish the year strong, but oftentimes that means setting up the next year, right? And making sure that things that we did wrong this year aren't going to be, we're not going to make the same mistakes this year, those kinds of things, right? I mean, is this something that this has got to be something that we have to do more frequently than just once a year? So how much time should we be spending on this? How frequently should we be doing it? And most importantly, maybe what should we be looking at? Like, what are some of the, like when I do this type of stuff, I have my whiteboard, I write out my categories and I kind of go down the line, right? So what should that be looking like?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what area of the business you want to analyze. So, if I think about working with sales teams, for example, working with the client sales teams, we do a post-deal review, right? A post-pitch review. I mean, it's like instant. What went well, what didn't go well. So that's like way down in the weeds, analyzing the tactics. Could have phrased this differently. Could have positioned that differently. And that's not really what we're necessarily focused on. I think the knowing your numbers or analyzing your numbers is important. And I think at some level, you're doing it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis as a business owner, right? You're looking at, the money in the checkbook and the AR and the AP, and you've always got your hands on that stuff. But I think to zoom out just a little bit, at least quarterly, and definitely as you reach the end of the year, you should know where you're at from a P&L perspective, right? You should know where your profit and loss is at. You should have a good grasp of that all the time. But more importantly, I recommend looking at your revenue in a different way. Looking at your revenue broken out by the services that you offer, right? How can you categorize your revenue by service offering or even by client and know where the profit and revenue is? I can't tell you over the years how many times clients have told me, well, that service is a loss leader. We break even, but we always, we sell up to this next profitable thing. And when we look at the numbers, first of all, it's not break even. You're losing money on that thing. And 1% of the time, do you ever upsell them? So it's not a loss leader, it's a loss loser. Just dump it, right? Dump that thing. But they're not looking at that level of detail. They're not really analyzing it for what it is, not what they think it should be. So look at your revenue by services and by clients. I think that's really important. I mean, the marketing guy in me says, look at your new clients for the year and understand what marketing activities and what marketing expenses that you spend that can directly relate to new clients and new revenue. How can you connect those dots, attribute your marketing activity to new revenue? A lot of times we don't spend the time to really break that down. We go with the gut, oh, that was probably a referral. And I think that one came from a trade show. And I don't really remember where that if you've documented it well throughout the year, you should be able to look at it very easily. So I think that's really important. And then the final thing I would say on this particular topic, because I could probably go on for far longer, is rethink your ideal client, right? We probably have an image in our heads as a business owner of who our ideal client is, and you can describe it in any number of ways. But take that image and throw it away for a few minutes. Look at your revenue and attribute your revenue and profits to the clients that you work with. And when you look at those most profitable clients, the profile of those companies, do they match who you believe this other fictitious profile is? A lot of times it's different. You have an image of who you think your ideal client is, but when you look at the numbers, it's a different type of business. So there's an opportunity there to sort of get some alignment and rectify that and move into the next year with more clarity. So I think those are some things, tactical things you can sort of start to analyze pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to steal a Deanism that he and I talked about the other day. Dean's like, what is that?
What did I say? Yeah.
You're in trouble now. Having conversations with your current clients.
Yeah.
What is it that they appreciate about what you do? Why did they buy from you? And maybe that's going to even influence how it is that you're tackling marketing differently in the next year. I mean, product offering. I was talking to a gentleman earlier today. I have a teenage daughter. We bought a homecoming dress. I can tell you, if you talk to any mom of a teenage child, it was a disaster. I went to the mall. Do you know what I saw? Nothing. We needed shoes. Do you know what I found? Nothing. I ordered 7 dresses. They came, we played fashion show, and we picked the one and we sent everything else back. And I scrambled to find a pair of shoes. Now, I realize not everyone has teenage daughters that they're trying to put into homecoming clothes, but I think that there's a parallel here to what's going on in the world, which is that things have changed drastically. And so even in 2021, obviously 2020, complete change. 2021, a lot of change. 2022, how are you going to market? What is that going to look like? Have you analyzed it? To answer your question, as far as what you should be looking at during these conversations that you're having with yourself, it's very specific to your niche. If I'm a sales leader, I'm looking at different numbers than I am. If I'm a business owner versus I'm a department head, if I'm in a corporate space, those are all very different. I mean, net, we're trying to figure out what are your MBOs, right? And doing the analysis from there and really making sure that you have the right data that you have access to.
Can you clarify the acronym?
Major business objectives. So whatever your goals are, the things that you're trying to achieve. I mean, the hope is, you asked this question earlier about what should we be focusing? My hope is that, considering the fact we're in fourth quarter, that you kind of already know what your targets are. Now, they may have shifted a little bit based on some changes, but for the most part, you're moving in a direction. Right now, we may need to slightly tweak that. Our hope is that you're not completely changing it. Maybe you are, because of some extenuating circumstances in the type of business that you do. But when you're looking at those numbers, you're crunching the numbers relative to your major business objectives, your goals, your focus on your organization and what your level is within that group. I mean, if you're a salesperson, you want to not only be able to look at your numbers, but you want to analyze, what's going on over there? Why is that guy so successful? And what am I missing out on? Right. I mean, even Ian, in your business, how do we use systems and processes, data that we already have access to? How are we setting up ourselves for success so that we can use automated systems? Are we still doing things manually that we should be doing automated? Right. So what you're looking at is going to be very specific to what your role is. The time that you should spend, or the frequency, in my opinion, is you should spend a half a day a month analyzing, and you should spend a full day a quarter. Now, you knew I was going to do this.
It's the famous Stephanie move. Are you kidding me?
I know, I had to. Sorry. If you've read this book, Profit First, Mike is very specific about how frequently and the time that you should be sitting down and doing your analysis for Profit First. Now, I'm going to go back to my comment that I made earlier, Ian. What gets scheduled gets done, with the exception, asterisk, Ian doesn't need it to be scheduled. Sure. So if you know that you want to do this on the days that Mike recommends, you better put it in your calendar today. And by the way, his dates are, in the middle of the week and sometimes on the weekend. So you might have to go back and move it from a Saturday to a Tuesday or something like that. Or maybe you make the decision you're going to do it the first and fourth Fridays of the month. Whatever that looks like, put it on the calendar now so that you could schedule your world around it. Because if you don't have that stuff on the calendar, things happen. And then all of a sudden you're scheduled up and, oh gosh, I haven't done my quarterly review. When am I going to, and then you've missed it. You've missed your opportunity. It's like a vacation, right? If you want to go on vacation, put it on the calendar, right? Schedule it, even if you haven't bought the plane ticket, because then you could schedule the things around it and you can actually go and enjoy your time and unplug. But we're just not spending enough time managing our calendars. I say this all the time, and this resonates. We spend more time trying to figure out what we're going to buy at the grocery store than we do analyzing how we're going to spend our next week. Think about that for a second. And my question to you is, what is your most valuable resource? And let me give you a hint. It is not money. It is time, all day long and twice on Sunday. So if that's the case, how are you, no pun intended, if that's the case, how are you analyzing where it is that you're spending your time? And back to the MBOs, is the time that you're spending, even back to our conversation today, between now and the end of the year, how does the time that you're spending, what you're scheduling, relevant to your MBOs of what it is that you're actually trying to achieve? Because if those numbers don't correlate, you've got a problem that you need to fix.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ian, before we move on, Stephanie brought it up because she and I talked about it the other day, this whole concept of talking to your clients, and anybody that knows me, I say this a lot. What a concept, right? The
deanism.
I would say if you're going to do that, I think that there are some really easy questions that you can ask that could have a huge impact. So I think the first is asking questions around what's changed in their business over the last 18 months or 2 years. Just a big open-ended question like that. What's changed? They will probably talk at you for as much time as you have. And the beauty of that is that you start to get insights into their world. you are positioned by extension as a thought leader, a confidant, a friend. You're building a relationship by asking that kind of question. And you're not asking it so you can learn how you can sell more stuff to them. That's not the intent here. The intent is really ask questions to learn and listen. So what has changed in their business? I think another question is, what are your plans for next year? Again, easy, short question, then shut up and let them respond. And those two questions will give you so much information that you can use for their benefit as well as your own. And then the third is, what can I do to help? And that isn't about how can I sell you more stuff. It's really about how can I introduce you to other people? How can I share more information? How can I reach back into my bookshelf and show a book that you need to read? That's about relationship building, right? One of the most powerful things you can do is build relationships in business. We all know that, but not many people are good at it or are intentional about it. So just asking those sort of empathetic questions will always open up opportunity, and inevitably it'll open up business opportunities for you, but that's not the primary intent. So if one of your top 2 or 3 things is connecting with your clients, ask them those questions. What's changed? What are their plans? How can you help? And you'll get some great information.
Hey, Dean, have you read any books lately about relationship building with customers?
Well, there is this book that this lady I know called Stephanie told me to read, and I did. It's called Mr. Schmooze. And I would say, if you're interested in building relationships with your customers and your network, go grab Mr. Schmooze. It's a really good one.
It's a fun book, short book.
It is fun, it's short, but it's great. There's some really good nuggets in there.
I love it. I love it. You know, it's interesting because you bring up the Stephanie earlier. You brought up the concept, the idea that, you know, over the past year and a half, and Dean, you kind of mentioned this too, that 2020 in particular was just insane, right? I mean, it was something that nobody could have expected, and I feel, and which is very true, but I feel like we had the same conversations in 2009, 2010. And then again, had the same conversations in 2000, 2001. And I feel like this is something that we kind of go through every 10 years or so. And it almost feels like and this just might be a little just crazy, but I mean, it almost feels like it's a reset in the relationship building opportunities that it does afford us that, right? Because I mean, I remember during the Great Recession, everybody kept saying, well, you know, if this, you know, I never saw this coming in 2008. I was just barely able to survive in 2009. I started working to rebuild in 2010. If I'm still rebuilding in 2012, then I'm going to have a problem, right? And so all of these kinds of things. But you know, when we get to this point in the year in particular, I feel like what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's especially after years like we've had this for the past 18 months to almost 2 years now, just like we had 10 years prior to that, and probably 10 years prior to that. I don't know, I was still in high school, but actually I was not yet in high school, but you know, I feel like what I'm hearing you guys say is that there's opportunity to take advantage of that almost and use it to almost to focus on being of service. We all talk about being of service, right? But this is a way that you can actually take the end of the year and find a lot of opportunity by truly trying to serve.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, you going through that description, it kind of got me thinking a little bit that there's always this cycle of opportunity. Right. And the opportunity to serve and to understand your market and to adapt your business should be a constant. But I think we get sometimes stuck in the rut of doing what we've always done and hoping that the world around us will adapt to us versus the other way around. And if you think about like Facebook, you know, 15 years ago, they didn't exist. Right. It wasn't a business. It wasn't a thing. Social media didn't really exist in the form that is today 15 years ago. How many businesses have made, if you take Facebook out of the equation, if you just think about the service businesses and the platforms and the applications that support that industry that didn't exist 15 years ago, it's incredible, right? There's more business now being created so quickly. And so when I think about these cycles, these decade-long sort of like cycles in business, we get the opportunity to reinvent ourselves and our businesses as quickly and as frequently as we like. And coming out of this particular cycle, the work from home factor has changed a lot. Is an opportunity in your business to not just embrace work from home from your employees, but leverage that concept. Where are the needs in the marketplace that are going to come up because of that? What about the great transition in employees, the great resignation? We have all seen the numbers. When there's change, there's opportunity. So I think don't look at it as this sort of thing we've got to get through. I think it's all about perspective. I tell my kids, and I've told them for years, the biological reaction of fear and excitement is basically the same thing. It's how we perceive it. It's that reporter on the Olympic start line. They say to the sprinters, "How do you feel?" Not one of them says, "I'm afraid." They all say, "I'm excited." And so it's perception. So we can get to perceive the world however we want. So I think that now is a perfect time to look at the next year or 2 or 3 and see how your business should adapt or evolve or completely change based on how the world is evolving around us. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was a soapbox for you.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it.
So my answer is going to be probably, I'm going to riff like Dean did, right? Take your question and kind of tweak it. But
Love it.
I would say, how are you going to change? What is going to change for that 10 years? I would say some of the things that we've gotten away from, which Dean kind of alluded to, using Facebook and electronic means to connect with people is great. But I'm going to throw in Mr. Smooth. The personal relationships that we have with other people, I want to do business with people who I know and who I have a relationship with. I can tell you that most of my clients, I know a lot about them. I know where they live. I know how many kids they have. I know where they went on their last vacation. What kind of personal relationship do we have with the stakeholders around us? And I don't just mean our clients and our customers. I mean people who refer us on a regular basis. I mean people who are in our supply chain. I mean people who we are working with in our building. If we have employees or team members or partners. What's our relationship like with those folks? I want to work with people that I like and that I know. And if you haven't taken the time, this is the opportunity to get to know those folks around you. Because another book I could pull out for you, The Defining Decade, which Dean and I actually talked about not too long ago. Great book. If you have 20 somethings, The Defining Decade talks about what happens in your 20s really change the trajectory of where it is that you're headed in the future. Obviously not completely relevant for today, but something to keep in mind for those of you who have like high teens or 20-year-olds. There's a chapter in that book that talks about the power of loose connections and having connections with people, period. People don't want to just have a connection with an app. They really want to hear from you. So if you want to call and find out how things are going and ask these questions, what's changed in your business in the last couple of years? What are your plans for next year? You know what, Ian? I'm just going to call and check in. I don't have to have a reason.
Yep.
I can just call and say hi. And you would be shocked. I met with a woman earlier today who was considered for me a center of influence, referred me some clients. I got on the phone first thing. I didn't even say hello. And she's like, let me tell you 2 people I need to introduce you to right now. Now I have a really great relationship with this individual, but how are we establishing relationships with these folks so that we can, exactly, Todd, marketing 101. Unfortunately, we're getting away from it. We're getting away from personal relationships and letting technology take over. It's not supposed to take over. It's supposed to supplement our relationships with folks. And so how do we use that as a tool in our toolbox, not as a primary methodology of how it is that we're trying to garner business or to build relationships with our clients?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just look at your LinkedIn inbox and you'll see that it's overwhelming garbage of just like people using the tool to reach out with the only reason is selfishness. They want to sell you something, right? There's no desire to build a relationship. And the few that do stand out. And they're the ones you want to follow up with and have a conversation with. But 99% of it is garbage. So it's well said. Well said.
You mean those people don't really want to learn more about me and my business?
Well, they want to learn how they can pry those dollar bills out.
Yeah, right, exactly. They want to learn how big your bank account is to find out how much they can siphon off.
Yeah. Especially those that want to sell you CRM and marketing automation suites, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to respond to Todd's comment really quick. There's a book I know Todd's going to be shocked to hear me say this. There's a book called Modern Appointment Setting. It's actually specifically for financial advisors, but it talks about the difference in the cell phone and how things have changed. So Ian, can you read his comment really quick for me?
Yeah, it says the cell phone has become a disconnection device, not a connection or communication device.
So the first page in this book actually specifically talks about the fact that our cell phones have changed and how we only use a cell phone, 7% of the time as an actual telephone.
As a phone, yeah.
And so there's some great things in this book, although it's specific to financial advisors. If you're looking to connect with your clients electronically, to use other methodologies. I will tell you, my kids don't. I'm sure, our Dean, your kids are probably like, Ian, you got a couple years before you can catch up with us. But
He doesn't have a
my
kid. He doesn't have a phone yet.
No, he doesn't have a phone yet. My kids totally, like, if they want to talk to me, in fact, my running joke now is like, just snap me. And they're like, Mom, that's not even funny. Like, no, I mean, like, really just send me a text because I can't Snapchat that well. But I jokingly say it because I know that's how they talk to each other.
Yeah.
That's their expectation. But they still appreciate, they want to hear my voice. Even when I was traveling the last few weeks, I joke with my youngest, I'm like, I know you don't need me to come home. She's like, oh no, you need to come back home. I don't have it all under control. I'm like, oh, you miss me. But it's the same thing with our clients. We haven't talked to them in a while, but they do like to connect every once in a while, voice to voice, face to face, belly button to belly button. Let's have a real conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're coming up on the top of the hour here, and one of the things that I particularly enjoyed about this conversation is that while we've talked about business, a lot of it has been focused around the non-business aspect, the non-working aspects of business, right? And making sure that that we're kind of taking care of ourselves, if you will, right? So let's talk a little bit about kind of recharging. And, one of the big questions that I always have every year is it really worth putting the pedal down for the last 40 days and just plowing and taking the perspective of the only way out is through, right? I mean, and just kind of getting through it to get to the end of it. And I'm sure that, everybody's favorite answer is it depends, right? I mean, there are situations in which it's going to be worth it, situations in which it's not. But, I wonder if you guys can kind of talk a little bit about how much time we should be taking for ourselves. 8 days out of the last 40 for Dean and 6 for Stephanie and whatnot, but because obviously that's an important thing too. And that's how we can finish strong in order to set up, because what I'm hearing is that finishing strong is more about setting up the next year, right? 2022 in this case, than it necessarily is about meeting a potential goal, or so, again, speaking generically, right, in general, but what should we be doing for ourselves? And I wonder if you can kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, my philosophy is I never want to waste a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds so like, oh, it's, whatever, right? But we really do have only a finite number of days, right?
Right.
And I think being intentional every day is important, whether it's intentionally doing nothing because you're doing it for a reason versus doing nothing because you're avoiding the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's important. So I think, yeah, I'm a believer in you do push hard. Entrepreneurship, owning a business, being in sales, whatever, it's hard. Shit gets real, right? That's just the fact. So I say, don't give up, right? That's part of being in this life is you don't give up, you push hard. I think that there's a whole concept around grit we could talk about that we don't have time for today, but I think this is a time to get gritty, show what you can do, but don't kill yourself doing it, right? There's this sort of balance there of working hard, being intentional, picking those 2 or 3 priorities that are going to finish off your year like you wanted it to and set you up for success next year. Be intentional. Be intentional. So me personally, I'm just not one that wants to give up and just say, I'm done. Nobody else is doing anything in the last week of the year. I'm not either. I had an old sales manager have this saying, your unfair advantage days throughout the year. Unfair advantage days are days where the other sales reps calling that prospect, just like you, are sitting off to the side. They're not doing it. It's the day before the holiday, the day after the holiday, Labor Day. you're the only one that's going to call that prospect. And there's a good chance that the gatekeeper is on vacation too. So guess what? You took advantage of that unfair advantage day and you got right to that prospect that you've been trying to call for months and you have a conversation with. So take advantage of it. Don't give up.
Yeah.
So a couple things. I changed my auto signature on Friday to quote Ben Newman, who is a motivational speaker. He works with a lot of like football teams. And his quote is, champions create distance on Fridays. And while we're not in a position, we're not talking about Fridays per se, I think it's the same concept. One of the 3 principles of the 12-week year is greatness in the moment. Like, what are you doing right now? Like, you get to make a decision right this second. Are you going to goof around on social media? Are you going to go chit chat at the water cooler? Or are you going to make that tough phone call that you've been avoiding, right? Eat that frog, right? What are the things that you're going to do specifically in this moment? And they don't have to be huge. They could be very small things that don't take a lot of time, but you need to make sure that you're getting them done. And to Dean's point, this is like carpe diem. Like, don't just say, I'm okay, game over, feet on the desk, kicking it up, I'm finished, we're not going to get it done, because there's always something. I remember one year I volunteered in corporate America to be the person who worked between Christmas and New Year's. And everybody's like, you're crazy. I'm like, nope, I had one project. I knew all year long that I wanted to write a proposal for something. And I spent that week being the manager on duty, but I wrote the proposal for that project. And on about January 15th, I got approved, right? I created that time for myself that I knew no one else would be in the office, that I could work on some project and no one would bother me. I have some time, which, to be honest, now that I'm saying that out loud, a couple of my days that I'm not working are actually going to be on some projects similar to that this next year or through the end of the year. And so my number's probably higher, Ina. I probably am closer to the 40 number, but we'll keep that between us kids.
Exactly. Right. Nobody needs to know that you're actually in the office.
That's right.
Right.
Just between us. The other thing that I would say too is you may not realize this, but the 12-week year is actually 13 weeks. If you've read this book, you will find out it's 13. Guess what we do in the 13th week? We rest.
Right.
We rest. We review, we reflect, we refocus, and we renew our commitment to what it is that's going on next time. So to Dean's point, if you're going to run, you know what? Run to the finish line, sprint, but make sure that you have that time so that you can actually really relax. Not like I'm going to run to the finish line and then have dinner for 35 people and then entertain my in-laws and then have people spend the night for 2 weeks. Like, really schedule the time to check out and relax, whatever that looks like for you, watching movies or hanging out with the family or just going to the mountains or skiing, whatever the thing is, schedule the time so that you can relax at the end of the year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're at 2:58. So the last question I like to end on here is, and Stephanie, I'll start with you. You could leave the people watching here with one piece of advice, one thing that you want them to walk away with. What would that be?
Oh my gosh.
No pressure.
Don't you love this question?
So why didn't somebody say this yesterday? I would have had a great one. Now I got to come off the cuff, although there's a lot of them. One piece of advice relative to the finish in 40 days. You know what? You got to stop to start. I think, Dean talked about it earlier. If you don't stop the merry-go-round, in a lot of cases, we're just rowing the boat as fast as we can, and we might be rowing in the wrong direction. Stop, re-navigate, figure out where you are, take time out of the office, go focus on yourself and your business and analyze. Don't just keep trying to hammer through, because you'll find that you're wasting a lot of energy and effort. Whereas if you just would have taken a hot second to figure out what was going on around you, you could be even more efficient and effective. We have so much margin that's available to us in our world. If we would just stop and figure out where the waste is, like Six Sigma yourself, right? And if you did that for a hot second, you would find there's a lot of margin, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. Are you going to reinvest it in your business? Are you going to invest on your family, or are you invest in yourself?
Awesome. Dean, what about you?
Take this time to reconnect.
Yeah.
Reconnect with people that you just haven't, whether it's family, friends, business partners, whoever it is in your world. Take this time to reconnect. People have are making the time to do that unintentionally, but you can do it intentionally.
Mhm.
That'll pay dividends.
Nice. Excellent. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up for today. Thank you both so much for being here, Dean, Stephanie. This has been it's been a great conversation. To everybody who's watching on Facebook, on Zoom, on the recording, thank you for being here. If you have questions that you want to ask our panelists but didn't get a chance to, drop them in the comments, and we'll make sure to try and get those answered. And with that, we will see you next month. Thanks again. Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, guys. See you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone. Bye.